there and welcome back to another Daredevil video. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. This follows off from that huge battle between Daredevil and Muse, with Daredevil having come out of retirement in order to save Angela and stop the serial killer who had killed upwards of 60 people. At the same time, Fisk authorized the formation of a brand new anti-vigilante task force made up of overzealous or corrupt cops. In essence, it's a recipe for disaster, and will ensure that the two will be on a collision course before too long. The episode properly starts off in Fisk's office, with him brooding about the fact he'd promised New York that he'd be bringing Muse to justice. That he'd ensure that this monster was caught, even going so far as to create this new task force, and yet despite all of that, nothing. They've brought him no new information. This is when Daniel and Buck chime in and tell him there's in fact a new lead in this case, with Angela Del Toro being dropped off at a hospital suffering from some extreme blood loss. In the episode, they say that she loses about 2,500 milliliters, which I feel is excessive, right? That's roughly half the blood of the average person, and she is very small. How the hell is she still alive at all? Daredevil had to carry her all the way to the hospital, in which time, wouldn't she have been going into organ failure? Yet the very next day she was able to tell the police with accuracy what happened and where she was? Didn't her heart actually stop during the fight as well? It's a bit nonsensical. Regardless, Fisk tells them both to leave when he hears that Daredevil's back and then faces towards the window. Great facial acting here. You see so many different emotions flitting over his face. Frustration that it's Daredevil that's brought them the first big lead on Muse and his location. Anger and rage that Matt's seemingly gone back on his word and is a vigilante again, and perhaps even a little bit of joy that he's giving him an excuse to come after him now. The credits then play, and when we return, it's over to Angela, who's having dreams of what happened while she's laying in the hospital bed. Here, there's a really cool snap transition of Daredevil looking down at her and comforting her after saving her, into him in the shower looking completely broken. I like that even though they've had him return to being Daredevil, he doesn't wipe away the misgivings he has about it. It doesn't make the trauma with Foggy just go away completely. It doesn't stop him feeling guilt or doubt, which I liked. It makes him feel like a real person with real trauma that he hasn't dealt with properly at all. Heather then hops in the shower with him, and while she initially seems majorly concerned about his wounds and bruises, the scene very quickly becomes quite steamy. When I first watched this part, I figured it was simply a scene that's there for the sake of having some steam. In hindsight though, having watched the full episode, I suspect this might be one of the last moments of normalcy before shit well and truly hits the fan for these characters, and events begin to spiral out of control. Of course, he can't avoid the conversation forever, and he and Heather end up having a very real and raw conversation, where he straight up lies to her and says that he went for a walk and hurt himself, since he's blind and he can't always figure out where the hazards are. Of course, we know that this is bullshit, but she seems to buy it. Somewhat, because she also tells him that he needs to address his trauma before it ruins everything good in his life. I do wonder if she's going to find out that he's Daredevil at some point, or if in the end the strain of everything is going to destroy their relationship. It could go either way. Matt promises he'll work on things, but it's very clear that he has no idea how to actually address what's going on within himself. He thinks he has to fight his true nature and his trauma, whilst it's clear that, in actuality, he needs to work through it instead. He needs to talk to somebody, in depth. They do end the scene in a more happy way though, with Matt feeling her face, I guess, to get a grasp of what she looks like. It was a very cute ending, really. The hard conversations keep on coming though, as when Matt arrives for work that morning, he is immediately confronted by Cherry, who's fuming that Matt went out as Daredevil. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'm completely trusting this guy anymore. Dude is so anti-Daredevil, it is unreal. I get that he's a cop and he claims that he doesn't want Matt to keep blowing up his life or putting himself at risk like he does when he's Daredevil, but at the same time, this is a deranged serial killer, and Matt was right. If he hadn't gotten involved, then Angela, a teenager, would have had her blood drained, her eyes gouged, and her body dumped next to some artwork. At a certain point, you need to realize that even if you disagree with him being Daredevil, being a vigilante, that this is one of those times where you shouldn't be arguing about it. You shouldn't be angry about it. Muse is a horrific monster who needs to be stopped. That's all there is to it. I love how Matt calls him on this as well, reminding him how the cops used to call for Daredevil when there was a villain of this magnitude. I'm actually rather suspicious of Cherry, to tell you the truth. Part of me wonders whether he's going to be ratting out Matt at some point. Something just ain't sitting right here. Either that, or he's going to walk away from Matt, or he's going to realize that sometimes the vigilante is the only option left, and accept it. Even more hard conversations continue, because next up we have Buck and Fisk talking about Daredevil. Fisk is still brooding over the fact that Daredevil's gotten back to business. But Buck thinks that perhaps Daredevil coming back to the city and working to track down a deranged killer is far from the worst news they could have had that day. Fisk then rants and raves about how Daredevil had destroyed his foolproof enterprise, twisting himself into a pretzel to present himself as a go-getter and a martyr who was wrongly accused and unjustly arrested. He presents his criminal empire as some sort of small business for the little man that made the common people richer than they ever could have been before. Instead of thugs and criminals, he describes them as blue-collar millionaires. He whines about how Daredevil went after his men without due process, about how he went outside the law and broke their bones and spirits, as if he wasn't a violent crime lord. This was really well written, to be honest. There's so much venom for Matt in this speech, and you can see that mask begin to slip. That realization that he doesn't even view himself as a criminal. He's deluded himself in his own hatred towards Daredevil. What I did find curious, though, is that Buck was playing the role of Cherry in this scene. He's trying to steer Fisk away from the old way of doing things, trying to keep him on the straight and narrow. He reminds him that he's the mayor now, obviously trying to hint that he needs to let this one go and focus on more important things other than revenge. Fisk instead frames this as, "Oh, I have the power to go after this guy completely within the confines of the law." I did notice that Buck seems to be rather frustrated with Fisk this episode. When he and Daniel were first sent out of the room in the very first scene, he shook his head like he was frustrated and disappointed. Here, he clearly thinks Fisk is making the wrong call and is going down the wrong path. I enjoy that. It's good to give the characters depth and not have everybody just be a mindless sycophant. It feels more real to have somebody who's still on Fisk's side and will do as he's ordered, but can still push back a bit too. The episode then swings back around to the Muse storyline in more depth. As the cops are doing their first sweep of the lair, Matt goes to visit Angela in the hospital and asks her if there's anything unusual she can remember. Once again, it is baffling she's conscious at all right now, but also, didn't we pretty much see her entire time in captivity? She got knocked out by Muse and he carries her to his lair. He sets her up in the bloodletting device, and then he hears a noise and goes out where he's attacked by Daredevil. And the big finale of that episode begins. How would he have had the time to be doing the paintings and ranting about them to Angela? It doesn't make sense. Before we get a look at any more of this story though, first we have to continue with the episode's B storyline, where Luca meets up with Vanessa and tries to convince her that things were better when they were working together under her, as opposed to Fisk. In the midst of this serial killer storyline, I know that it's meant to give some variety, but at the same time, it was a little bit frustrating. I was at the point where I wanted to hyper-focus on the hunt for Muse, so this felt like it was sidetracking the episode. Also, is this guy just an idiot? Why bother trying to get Vanessa to turn? Dude would have been better off just trying to have Fisk straight up killed, instead of wasting his time blurting out his ideas. He should deal with both of them at once and try to take over himself. Ugh, fella doesn't have the killer instinct, and that's why he gets got at the end. Finally, it's showtime. Muse has his therapy session. I gotta say, his acting here was great. I love how when he was first speaking to Heather that Muse seems so regular, but then she brings up his parents and his whole persona starts to shift. From then on in the session, his whole personality keeps getting more and more unhinged, more unstable. Just a great performance. He goes on to tell Heather about how he used to compete in Taekwondo, hence why he's so good at fighting, I suppose. And at the same time as this, Detective Kim, who seems to just be involved in everything these days, is the one who's telling Fisk that they've managed to figure out who Muse is, a man named Bastian Cooper. They did this by testing that piece of canvas she found in his lair, which is apparently very rare, with only 2 stores in the city selling it. On top of that, only 12 people bought it recently, with Bastian being the only character unaccounted for. They did some digging and he was committed to a mental health institution 3 times in his youth, plus his childhood Taekwondo teacher, who Bastian in his scene with Heather says he hated, was found dead on their estate when Bastian was 16. I tell you what, it has been a single day since Angela was attacked. They did a lot of work. This feels like a very, very rapid police response, doesn't it? Doesn't analysing the fibres of the canvas take some time? Regardless, this whole sequence, which gives us his backstory whilst also showing us him becoming more and more unhinged, is so damn good. I was on the edge of my seat just waiting for him to snap to try to kill her. I was also thinking, damn, this is heating up far quicker than I thought it would, and wondered, is Fisk and his team going to save her? Not Daredevil? The music gets creepier and creepier. Muse draws his little picture with some blood from his nose. It's all so compelling. I feel like from now on though, if Heather ever does go back to practicing, because for sure this is a valid reason to change careers, I think she needs to have a panic button in her pocket or something. You'd never trust anybody again. The scene peaks right at the end when she gets upset and he goes to comfort her and he gives such a creepy line. I know what you're thinking. Can I make it to the door in time? Of course she can't. That slam into the wall was brutal. My God, they don't hold back. While she's unconscious, we have a couple of scenes just to cool us off a little bit. The first is more drama with Cherry, but this time it's Kirsten who's getting into it with him. The scene is pretty much her asking what the hell is going on with him and Matt, with Cherry trying to brush her off, while she tries to make him feel guilty that she trusts Matt and him fully, but they don't give her the same grace. I'm thinking that this scene might be setting up that Cherry is going to snitch, but it's not going to be to Fisk or the cops. He's going to tell on him to Kirsten. Whether she's supportive or not really does remain to be seen though. Realistically, she's gonna be salty that he's off doing his vigilante stuff, whilst their firm is inundated with cases and money issues though. Speaking of Matt, when the police step away from the crime scene, he swoops in to find some of the drawings that Angela described. This whole scene is such bullshit. How the hell can he possibly feel this largely two-dimensional drawing and be able to specifically link this to his girlfriend's face that he felt earlier that day? It makes absolutely zero sense. There were so many better ways to do this. I know some people could just explain it away as him having powers or super senses, but this is too much. You have to ground it in the reality that you establish. For the context of the story in this show, this does not make sense. Ultimately, it doesn't matter though, as the tension ramps up pretty much immediately after this to get to the big showdown. But it was still weird. At least we got to see Pal get wrecked once again. Daredevil runs off and Pal calls Fisk and tells him they managed to ID the pictures as Heather Glenn, which I enjoyed seeing actually rocked Fisk to his core. After his darker turn in the last couple of episodes, it was good to be reminded that he actually does have some compassion in his heart. He can care about people outside of just him and Vanessa. On top of that, having a serial killer that close to you probably wouldn't sit too well either. I would be freaked out if I knew that I had a second-hand connection with a serial killer for sure. Which of course leads us back to Muse, who whilst Heather has been unconscious, has been setting things up. He's suited up in his creepy serial killer gear. He has a gun, a knife, and a big sheet for his canvas. This scene is just all around uncomfortable in the best way. It makes you feel icky. You feel dirty as he's ranting about how she helped him realize his true self. Then he's holding her down and cutting open her arm as she cries and begs him not to. Meanwhile, I'm here yelling at the screen, waiting for Daredevil to burst in. This show does that so well. It makes you feel like the hero is going to get there, but maybe slightly too late, and it keeps going and going just long enough. The cops turn up outside, he goes into panic mode, he's not ready. He thought he'd have more time to set everything up. Of course, I'm still yelling at the screen here. Then Heather talks some shit, calls him a freak and a coward, which is fair. It is true, and since she probably figures she might die anyway, may as well. I love that she got to headbutt him too. He starts strangling her, and then finally, Daredevil bursts in. What can be said about this fight other than it is absolutely incredible? Brutal, fast-paced, bloody, and filled with twists and turns with an epic finale. After brawling a bit, Muse picks up a knife and charges Heather, only to get impaled by Daredevil's cable and beaten down severely, before out of nowhere, Heather lights him up with the gun he was using at the start of the fight and straight up kills him. Oh, great scene. Also, I loved how it contrasted with the last fight between Daredevil and Muse, where it was dark in this dank little underground lair. Here it was so bright out. You could see every little thing, every little detail, and it had such a different feel because of it. On top of that, you still have the tension of Heather bleeding out and the cops coming up the stairs, whilst Daredevil's trying to stabilize her. They burst in, and there's this great fake-out moment where they realize he's done their entire job and left, and now the goon squad has to deal with the cleanup of what happened. Normally, you'd think that the episode would probably end here, but luckily for us, we still have almost 10 minutes of content before that happens. We get some aftermath and some pretty political scenes where Fisk's camp starts to take control of the narrative. First of all, through Fisk simply telling the leader of the task force that nobody else was in the room, that they will be taking credit for this kill. Whilst at the same time, Daniel pretty much threatens BB into reporting that it was the task force that took out Muse, and not Daredevil. I know this is meant to seem like he's becoming corrupted by working for Fisk and going down a darker path, but at the same time, I kind of get it. She really did screw him over big time, and it almost cost him his life. Even though he's the biggest Fisk simp of all time, he knows how close he came to death. He won't be letting that happen again, and since she's clearly not above screwing him over, and didn't really seem to regret that she did, why not return the favor? Obviously, he's probably going to get worse and worse over time, but for now, I get it. We then finish with a very fun bait and switch, where it seems that Vanessa has set Wilson up to die at Luca's hands, telling Luca that Fisk is going to be eating alone at the restaurant, which is a prime place to get whacked. Unfortunately for our tracksuited friend, Buck is in the shadows and whacks him first, with it being revealed he was out of chances and that Vanessa had set him up to die, the old triple cross. This scene was great. Having the camera behind Luca, and then you can just see Buck in the distance, blurry, raise his gun, and then boom, it's over. Fisk doesn't even flinch, he just keeps eating, and thanks him before telling him to ask Vanessa if she wants him to bring him anything from this place before they leave. I gotta say, no idea what Luca was thinking with this. Just feels so stupid and reckless. Ugh, well, see you later, chump. Or not, I guess. So Vanessa has reaffirmed her loyalty to Fisk. I don't think it's gonna last forever, though. I do think she's going to turn at some point. This was just too early. And so that brings us to the end of the episode. A really great one, although there was a couple of leaps in logic that were a bit annoying. Regardless, the Muse scenes, the fights, and that ending was so much fun that it makes up for the feeling the picture scene and the other goofs. I'm very excited to see where we go from here. It seems the organised crime side of things is over for now with Luca's death, and we'll focus on Daredevil versus the law. Can't wait. So with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.